Hello, Paul.
Hey.
We're back for another exciting episode of Free to Speak. That war topic was pretty interesting, Paul, and also the last two where we kind of dedicated our episodes to taking comments from people, and that led to a discussion related to single motherhood.
Yeah.
So we talked about that. At the time that we're filming this, the episode on single motherhood has not yet posted because we record these things in advance. So we don't really have comments to respond from that episode, but if we do get any comments from that episode, we will talk about them in a later episode. A lot of what we're discussing within a wider context is the idea of freedom, because most of the things that we've talked about have in some way or another connected with the idea of freedom of speech, for example. And early on, we got a comment from somebody who talked about there being freedom within boundaries. And we had talked about how we think that there should be freedom within boundaries. For example, if you're driving a car, you don't necessarily have a right to do whatever you want because you're going to have chaos on the road, if everybody can do whatever they want. So you've got to have some rules that put boundaries on people. But we also talked about how we didn't like that when it comes to speech, because what happens with speech is it's those that are in power who get to decide what should be free and what shouldn't be free. And then we had talked about with the abortion issue, does a woman have a right to do whatever she wants to with her own body? But a baby is not part of a woman's body. It's a separate human life. So does the principle of a woman has the right to do whatever she wants with her own body work in the case of a fetus? And we talked about that the answer is no, it doesn't logically, because it's a separate human life. So even though we call this free to speak, and we believe in freedom of speech, it doesn't mean that we believe freedom to do whatever you want. What are the boundaries to freedom? And I guess we've talked about that all along, but let's maybe make this a broad general topic, maybe as a summary of everything we've talked about so far.
Yeah, thank you, Bobby. Freedom is a very broad word, which is even quite difficult to define, because there is no such thing as absolute freedom. Because if there were something like absolute freedom, it would mean absolute chaos. In essence, like
absolute freedom leads to absolute chaos. I like that. I like
exactly.
that. Yeah.
So, because if, for example, if everyone was free to do whatever they could do, that means there would be no laws. There would be no rules. We just live life with no rules and no laws, and that means someone can kill you whenever they want because they're free to do it. I'm free to do whatever I want. So basically, absolute freedom is, to me, absolute chaos. So I would still like to allude to our previous comment about freedom within boundaries.
Or that was a comment from somebody. Right, a comment that we agreed with, but yet we made an exception for freedom of speech.
Yeah, so basically, yeah. So I think it applies everywhere. So if freedom has to have some boundaries. Otherwise, your freedom cannot impede on someone else's freedom, and that's what the concept of absolute freedom would look like, where, you don't care how other people are affected by what, you exercising or enjoying your freedom. Yeah. That's how I look at freedom.
Yeah.
So we're able to, you can do what you want as long as, you're not impeding on other people's freedom as well.
Well, when I'm talking about freedom of speech, where I don't think it should be restricted, I'm talking about the free expression of ideas. So, for example, I'm not talking about I have the right to go to a theater that's packed full of people and scream, "The theater is on fire, run," if the theater is not on fire, because then I'm creating chaos. So freedom of speech is not the freedom to say whatever you want. Freedom is the freedom to express any idea that you want, even if the people in power do not like it, even if people who are woke are offended by it and consider it to be hate speech. That's what I'm saying about freedom of speech. So that's a boundary that I'm not willing to put on speech.
Yeah, so basically, in a social context, what is normal is what is considered by the greater majority as normal. That's what normalcy is, because there's not something there might not be anything as such as social normalcy, rather what society or the greater majority looks at as normal. So if people, if the greater majority assumes or looks at let's say, a particular behavior or a dress code as normal, then it goes. Yeah, and that's the freedom within boundaries. You're free to express yourself within the boundaries of normalcy of the particular society. But if you're expressing yourself outside the boundaries of normalcy, then you're going to expect to have to be challenged and be criticized.
So so in a situation like America where woke culture is dominant though, and we're outside of that. And so we had talked about earlier that we don't think that we should be outside, but yet we're outside of maybe what's considered acceptable within American culture right now. So where does that put us?
But then who defines American culture? Because much as I've not been to America, but I know that the greater majority of Americans may not subscribe to woke culture. It's just that woke culture is being imparted on them by the minor group of people, but then they're the ones in power.
Mm-hmm.
How much freedom is too much? Maybe in a bigger context. Mm-hmm. And when is freedom not so useful? And do we need freedom full time, or maybe we need freedom with, like I said, freedom within boundaries? But when is freedom a pain? When is freedom a problem?
That's an interesting question.
Is freedom all good?
Is freedom all good? That's another good question.
Yeah. Like the absolute freedom, would be chaos. I would say that absolute freedom is absolute chaos.
Absolute freedom, yeah. Shouting fire in a crowded theater would not be freedom of speech because it's not freedom of ideas.
We had a professor from Makerere. She's called Stella Nyanzi. So she's always gone out and vulgarized the president of the country and strip them naked, like poetically, speaking very vulgar terms, sexual terms about the president's wife.
This in Uganda?
Yeah, in Uganda. Yeah. So she could go on social media and write very botanical words, scientific terms about private parts and etc. Well, she was vulgarizing the president's wife. So yes, freedom of speech, but is that too much? Eventually now she's in exile. But did she cross the line? Is that still freedom? Is that still useful freedom?
Did she cross the line? And I don't know if I necessarily have a definitive answer on that. But I know from the American perspective, and this is just kind of the way Americans view freedom of speech, they would say that that's fair game because that's a public figure.
Is it freedom to talk about someone's private parts? Just because they're public
Is it freedom to talk about? Yeah, and I see your point on that. Yeah, do you have a right to?
So you mean
to get vulgar with it?
Yeah, public figures they don't deserve respect or something.
They don't deserve respect. Yeah. So these are all good questions. And a lot of it is going to depend on how you define freedom or how you define freedom of speech.
Yeah, and guess who gave them asylum? I think they're abroad. They're in the Western world.
Probably the United States.
Yeah, probably
the United States. Somebody gave them asylum.
Most likely United States. That's where they are.
Yeah, most likely.
And they're still vulgar.
But you don't know for sure.
President. No, I think it's United States. Most likely. So you find that she's on Twitter. Still, she does the same work. And she's not the only one. There are very many on Twitter talking about vulgarizing the president. There was a news anchor from India. So they had a press conference with the prime minister, and they were asking the prime minister very stupid questions, very personal, stupid questions. And the prime minister like, okay, if you were in your own country, would you ask your prime minister these questions? Do you know I can arrest you right now? So she threatened to arrest the guy. She literally blasted him and shut him up. Because yes, I know you're a news anchor, but regardless, you don't just ask just about anything. You have to have a script that makes sense. But they were really asking personal questions about her family.
Right.
What she asked him was really valid. She said, okay, I know we have freedom and etc. But the questions you're asking me or the comments you're making right now, if you were in front of the Indian Prime Minister, would you ask them the same questions? Because they were very disrespectful remarks that they were making. Yeah, so that's why the ambiguity is about freedom of speech. Yes, we should be able to speak freely about what concerns us, but some things that don't concern us, maybe we want to let them go. Something like that. That's why
choose your battles wisely, maybe.
Yeah, choose your battles wisely. For example, about the homosexuals or LGBTQ community, they can do whatever they want. They can speak whatever they want, but then they don't have to impose it on other people. That's a battle we don't want to engage ourselves in. But if they were doing their things in private, then no one will be battling them. But then they're imposing it on children.
Right. In schools.
In schools, there are curriculums where they showed some videos. I've been watching them online where there's a curriculum teaching dad is a mother, dad is a woman, mom is a man, and they're teaching children, and they're even showing pornography in some of these nursery school books.
I know.
It was not right. That's not right. No, that's too much of freedom, and
Yes.
it's impeding on other people's freedom.
Freedom is not the right to have pornographic books in children's or schools' libraries.
Kindergarten.
Kindergarten, yeah, that is a real thing in the United States. That is not freedom. That is not freedom.
So yes, freedom. We want freedom. We advocate for freedom. That's why we are free to speak, because we are advocating for freedom to speak about some of these things that people are afraid to speak about. But then still we have our boundaries.
Factual information,
factual.
not defamation type
Exactly.
words. Yeah. There are other aspects to freedom that we could talk about as well, too, Paul. So, for example, here in Uganda, you pretty much have the freedom to live your life the way you want to live and to go where you want to go.
Spend your money wherever you want.
Exactly. Spend your money where you want to, but the catch is you have to have the money to go where you want to go. So if I want to go to the northern part of the country and go, see some people up there, visit something up there, I've got to have the money to do things. So we can get into the question of how much is freedom impacted by your wealth? And if you're poor or less rich, or maybe if you're more economically challenged, are you really free?
No.
No. So, I mean, you're maybe free to some extent, but your wealth can your freedom can oftentimes be limited by your wealth. And I wanted to kind of discuss that aspect.
Maybe we want to look at it more as financial freedom, not economic, because economic freedom would imply things like I can invest the money wherever I want to invest it. And that is highly impeded in any country, really. Anyway, it's not just in Uganda. There are businesses where you can't invest your money as an average person.
Right.
Yeah, And let's say I want to start a strip club. In Uganda, it may not work. I don't have that economic freedom to engage in such an economic activity. But let's say what you're trying to talk about is maybe financial freedom. I can spend my money the way I want. I can do whatever I want with my money as regards to spending it. Yeah, so that's limited definitely by how much you have. The less you have, the less financial freedom.
So you said start a strip club. But can you start? Is it illegal to have it? Is that?
No, I know it's illegal here.
Yeah, it's illegal here.
It's illegal here, but it happens because every time you go to a place, Uganda, let's say a club, and they're saying there's a karaoke night. The karaoke is usually just euphemism for strip club. They just trying to cover up, and it's usually a strip club. But sometimes just normal karaoke and they're singing. But many a times they start singing for the first 30 minutes, 1 hour, then they start stripping. So it's just euphemizing the strip club because it's illegal, and it happens a lot. Every time it happens, the police will come and arrest people.
So they do but how often? So every time it happens, or how often does it not happen?
So every time it happens, the police is tipped because there's a lot of corruption in this country. So they don't really care about you people, the police as per se, not the lawmakers, because the lawmakers have made it with the intention of maybe let's say safeguarding the children from this kind of perversion and etc. They have their greater good, morality good, but then the immediate police that are coming to arrest these strippers are just trying to get a bribe. So they come there, they're very rough, they rough them up, but then they know their boss will give them like 1 million shillings and they'll let them go. So it's more of intimidation. The enforcement is lacking.
So that leads me to a question, Paul. We talk about strip clubs, but it leads me to the question of what is freedom in terms of these kind of exploitive sort of things like strip clubs or any of these kind of adult clubs or even adult movies. We could even say pornography. In America, these things are considered to be part of freedom of speech, freedom of expression. But these things are devastating and destructive on American culture and society. There's, for example, pornography. There's pornography everywhere. It's technically illegal for children under 18, but it's easily accessible by children under 18, and children find this stuff. And it's absolutely destructive what porn or these adult clubs or adult bookstores or strip clubs, what all this sex culture and immorality does, it's absolutely destructive. So is porn and strip clubs and adult bookstores and all these things, does that and should that fall into the category of freedom?
You can have the freedom to move topless as a woman. Yeah, it might make sense, but then if you move topless, do you know how many young people you're corrupting? Do you know you're increasing the chances of being raped by some men who would not have had that idea if they didn't see you naked?
We can argue, oh, they shouldn't do that, but the reality is there's dangerous men out
that's
there
the reality.
who will. And we acknowledge they shouldn't do that. The reality is that there are men out there who do that.
Yeah, sometime I had an argument with discussion. Argument is not bad, right? The bad one is an argument, which is negative. But an argument, we had an argument with a feminist, and she's telling me, I was asking her about dress code, female dress code, let's say promiscuous dress code, or half nakedness. She's like, yeah, but they're not naked. Our great grandparents used to walk naked, and there was no problem. So I'm like, okay, so what are the chances that these women are getting raped? They're very high. And then if you look at the many women that are being raped, usually they're dressing, in a way that is salacious. And you find that the person who is raped the second time, they're the same individuals who are being raped more than once. Yeah, of course, there are those one-time cases. Let's say the uncle raped them, usually at home. But then there are these people who are being raped, on the streets. Every time you find the one girl has been raped over 3 times. But many times you find that they're having these messages, subtle messages, because of just how they dress. So sometimes when you dress salaciously, then you're turning on people who would rather not be turned on if you dressed appropriately.
Right. You're turning on danger. You can turn on some dangerous people.
Some very dangerous people. So yeah, when you tell you to dress well, it's not like we're impeding on your freedom. Sometimes we're just trying to protect you. You can have the freedom, but then you should be wise around your freedom. But then since people are not everyone has the ability to be wise about the freedom that they have, that's why we have laws. That's why we have moral codes. That's why we have cultures.
So, and you said that strip clubs were illegal in Uganda. And what about pornography? Is pornography legal in Uganda?
Yeah, pornography is illegal.
To either produce it or to consume it?
Yeah, it's illegal. It's illegal. And yeah, of course people get it.
What happens to, how do they enforce? How do they, is there enforcement, or do people just watch it and they get away with it as long as...
Yeah, so ideally, I'll start with, there was a time of elections around 2021 where they switched off internet in Uganda. You could not access social media. But people got VPNs and they were able to do, to continue social media.
Like Facebook, for example, which is Facebook still banned in Uganda?
They say it's not banned, but
it's being restricted, because I know I can't get Facebook without a VPN.
Yeah, sometimes you can get it without VPN, sometimes
that's my experience. Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't.
So it's on and off. But anyhow, so in that time, people found ways to use VPN. They still accessed Facebook, and even WhatsApp was off for the voting period. But people are using it because they are using VPN. There's always a way around.
There's always a way around.
Yeah, so even now, pornography is illegal in Uganda, but people... If you go to your phone, let's say, or your computer, and you try to access a porn website, you won't access it. But then people are using VPN, and they're still accessing it. Yes. So how they're trying to enforce it? Yeah, they're banning it online. You can't access it normally on the internet. But then you have to have alternatives like VPN and other ways to get it. So it's illegal. But then, as much as enforcement, sometimes it's about if you're caught in the act, then you're caught.
Right.
But there's no actives.
There's nobody going. There's no police going around trying to see who's accessing.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
There's no policing in for that. But then, if they catch you, then if you're unlucky for that day, you're caught and it's illegal.
Can you give an example of how somebody might be caught? Like, what would be a scenario in which somebody could or would get caught? Like, if they're doing something publicly, or at a library or something, or they access something on a public or work computer.
No. Yeah. Okay. Like, for example, if you are the obvious one is the adult clubs.
Okay.
That one's obvious. They'll catch you, and if you're unlucky, if you don't have enough money, or if you're caught by a really genuine police officer, then you face the law. But if you're caught by the corrupt persons, then you just have to pay the money. Still, it's at a cost, yeah. But then, let's say you're showing a movie a pornography movie, because there are cinema halls for the low end people, not the cinemas of 3D, but there's cinema halls where the average Ugandan goes, where you pay almost 200 shillings to watch a movie, 500 shillings. But so those some of these cinemas, they show blue movies. I don't know if is it called blue movies in America as well?
Yeah, well, that's a term, yes.
So they show blue movies once in a while, but police can come and grab everyone watching that movie.
Yeah.
And they'll struggle. they'll have to face the law as well.
Well, that leads me to another question of where do we draw the line between a movie that has pornographic content and a movie that has sexual content? Because my wife and I go to movies at the cinema on a regular basis. And every once in a while they have movies that would be considered rated R in the United States, and they have strong sexual content in it. And yet these seem to be allowed to go. And I know that sometimes things seem less restrictive than they are in the U.S. because I'll be in the mall and I'll hear a song in the background at the mall that has uncensored language that wouldn't even be allowed in public necessarily in the United States, but it's here, and it's you have like F words and graphic language type things, and sometimes I wonder about where is that kind of line in terms of what's acceptable here and what's not acceptable here, and how do they determine where that line is?